And we're live. Good morning, comic book fans. Welcome back to Comics in 5 Minutes. I'm your ever-loving host, Shorty. Today I'm reviewing Rorschach. And before I get into it, I'm not entirely sure I'm going to get through in 5 minutes. That's all I'm saying, because there's an awful lot of things to consider. For a start, I was already kind of writing this review before I'd even cracked the spine on it, which instantly gets to the problem of, because this has got an awful lot of history to it, and you're doing anything related to an Alan Moore character as a comic book thing. There's a writer that I'm a really big fan of and an artist I really like. But then there's also the idea that it's an untouchable thing. But should that actually get in the way of what could potentially be a good comic book? Should you just say no to it because the fact that it exists at all goes against your sensibilities? There's a lot to unpack. And if you've been following any kind of geeky culture on social media for this past week, you'll see that Alan Moore has been out doing the rounds again promoting his movie, and as a result, a lot of very lazy journalists just keep asking him about his comic book work and how he feels about movie adaptations. We already know what he thinks. We know he is a grumpy old Alan, but he isn't. He's a nice guy, just grumpy because everyone keeps asking him the same ruddy questions. But when you're bringing out a Rorschach comic book at the same time you're interviewing about a movie, you can kind of see why people would want to try and get that as a soundbite for their article. Me, I have no such attempt to be able to do that. I literally can only talk about what I feel about this thing. So right off, we cannot ignore Watchmen. It can't be done. Watchmen, seminal piece of work and an absolutely brilliant bit of political writing using the form to perfection. Can we say the same thing for this? Not whether or not it should exist. Let's just now say if it even comes close to managing what it set out to do. Let's imagine if we can a world where Watchmen doesn't exist. Without that as a background, could somebody pick this up? Yes, they could. You don't need to have, from issue 1, I can tell you straight away, you don't need to have read Watchmen at all. But does it have that same kind of bite that Watchmen did? Can we compare the two? Well, I'm with it until right at the end, because it does some great things. For a start, I'm going to say Jorge, I forgot his surname, Jorge Fornes' artwork is just top of his game. Now, weirdly, his stuff is kind of understated, so I struggle to find something which really pops off the page to show you how good he is. So I picked this one panel at the bottom here, because it is kind of understated, but there's a lot going on there, and it shows an immense talent, so you cannot complain about that. Tom King is writing it, and to be honest, this is probably the lowest described Tom King that we've had in store since Omega Men, I should imagine, because I think a lot of people who've really enjoyed his stuff have seen him taking on an Alan Moore project and thought, well, I used to like you, but he's still a great writer. That cannot be denied in the way he lays out his pages and the way he bounces off the art and the way he writes amazing dialogue. And he does kind of build up a very low-key tension. It reads almost like a detective comics kind of thing, where it's a lot of figuring things out and it's a lot of putting stuff together, and that's great. We're dealing with something that is a criminal action and trying to figure out what's going on. And if anyone remembers this comic book we are comparing it to, that's kind of how it starts in there as well. It's something happened which people don't have an easy answer to, so they're trying to figure it out. Now, in Watchmen, it ends up tying really nicely into this whole expanded world, dealing with history and notions of Superman and all that kind of thing. The ending of issue 1 on this one, I hate to say it, is the reason why it's not on my pull list. I'm going to read issue 2, and if it's great, I should be able to find a copy of issue 1. DC will have made millions of this thing. But there's an ending, there's a final page to it, which, don't get me wrong, it wasn't like all through the comic book I was thinking, oh, I know how this is going to end. But about 3 pages from the end, they drop something, and it's like, oh, you are not going to do that, are you? And it turns out they entirely do that thing. And it's disappointing, because it starts so effectively. It's definitely doing political stuff. There's slightly less stuff, although I'm not entirely sure Watchmen can claim to be as subtle as I remember it being when I first read it. It's maybe because I'm paying attention to this kind of thing more these days. But there is clearly a lot of political stuff going on there, and there's matters of policing and various kind of things going on there, which makes sense for a Watchmen comic book, no argument there. The way it's all put together, pieces of puzzles falling into place, but I think there's going to be quite a lot of other stuff that's tied into what's going on here as well, and that's great. But you can't end an issue 1 with something like that, which they clearly intended to be a huge bombshell. Oh my gosh, we're going to have to figure out what's going on. This clearly makes no sense. It's going to be a massive mystery, even bigger than the mystery we were trying to solve in the first place. Again, not really a bad idea, but what they've done is just I feel I don't want to use the word because I think it'll turn people off it, and it's such a well written, such a great idea, such a well presented comic book. But for the last 2 pages, the word running through my head was just lame. It's disappointing. I was hoping I could convince people who may have turned their back on this one because it was digging into Alan Moore's back catalogue that no, it's okay, it's in good hands. But unless they really do something special for the rest of it, it's going to be hard to justify that, I'm afraid. Anyway, that's it for me for this one. I'm going to come back with another review later on the day because we've literally got too much stuff to review this week, and you just doing one a day is not going to be enough. So take it easy. I'll be back later on. Bye.